I would love to introduce my dear colleague, Marilène Oliver. So I am really pleased to introduce Marilène. She's an assistant professor here in printmaking in the Department of Art and Design. And her work is at the crossroads between new digital technologies, traditional print, and sculptural practice. So she teaches in printmaking, but really works on print in the expanded field, so a kind of intermediate approach to print. Those of you who've checked out her exhibition downstairs, which is currently in the FAB Gallery and is up for another 6 weeks, 4 weeks?
1 week.
Only 1 week. Okay, so if you haven't gone to see it, I wish it was up forever. It's a beautiful exhibition that her and another colleague of ours, Tanya Harnett, have done together. So I do encourage you to go down and check it out. And anyway, for those of you who have seen it, you can see that what Oliver does in her work is bring together various scanning technologies like MRIs, CT scans, PET scans, to, in her words, reclaim the interior of the body and create works that allow us to materially contemplate our increasingly digitized selves. So at the intersection of kind of digital technologies and the phenomenological material body. Oliver trained at Central St. Martin's in the UK, and then at the Royal Academy, the Royal College of Art, also in London, where she obtained a master's in philosophy, an MPhil, with a practice-based research project called Flesh to Pixel, Flesh to Voxel, Flesh to XYZ. And this was a project that crossed practice theory lines and was on the use of medical imaging in contemporary art. She is internationally renowned. She's exhibited widely in the UK and Europe, in public and private galleries and museums, including the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Royal Academy, Mass MoCA, the Knoxville Museum of Art, and the Kunsthalle Aachen in Germany. Her work is held in a number of private collections and in private collections and public collections, such as the Victoria and Albert and the Wellcome Trust, which is an amazing museum if anyone has the chance to go there. And I am really pleased to invite her up to the stage to talk about work that she's been producing since 2001. Yes, so please welcome.
Thank you, Natalie. Can everybody hear me? Is this working? I can't tell. Can you hear me?
There's a thumbs up in the back.
Okay. So thank you all for coming out on this very cold and snowy night. I appreciate all the effort to come. In preparing this talk, I thought I would retrace my steps a little bit to where you are now. So, yeah.
I don't think your mic is on, actually. Will you just on the bottom? So we can hear you, but it's not amplified. Try that again.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah, there we go. Okay, sorry.
A bit.
Yeah, so as I was saying, in preparing this talk, I thought I would think about what some of the questions that as faculty or instructors we ask you, which is what is your subject matter? What are the influences that get you started? How do you find a subject matter? Why is it as artists we find something and kind of say, this is what I make work about? So I was thinking back to when I was an undergraduate student and I was at Central St. Martin's, as Natalie said, and I was doing a course on the uncanny body, so studying Lacan and a lot about desire and lack. And at the same time, this was back in the late 1990s, these spaces started emerging in London. This is an internet cafe. They kind of were around for a while, but now disappeared. But it was so strange to me that to go into these spaces where it was you're going for to do something social, to interact with other people. You walked into the room, but you didn't actually engage with any other people in the room. And it really struck me as this is something important that's shifting in the way that humans interact with each other, and I wanted to make work about it. So I decided to focus on thinking about the physical versus this virtual body, this projected communication. So I wrote an essay, and then in writing that essay I came across a number of really big influences which now I think keep informing the work and keep pushing the work. The first is Hans Moravec. He was an early researcher in robotics and artificial intelligence. And his writing was speculative and provocative, but as an undergraduate student, I took it as being truth and kind of went up against it. So he was saying that in the future we would need to download our unconscious into the datascape in order to survive. And as somebody who was very interested in working with the body, my question was, well, if we do that, what happens with the body? Is the body just left out? Can the body not enter in this new world, of the internet and the datascape? So I started thinking about these virtual bodies and came across this guy, Joseph Paul Jernigan. He's also known as the Visible Human Project. And this was a project that was done in the mid-80s as an anatomical project for medical students. So the project was that they wanted to create a virtual searchable body, a digital copy of the human body. And so they set out to tender to people to do this project. And the people that won the tender, they proposed to take a man, freeze him, slice him very finely, photograph the slices, upload those slices onto the internet and make him searchable. And so I heard about this project and I came across this. So this is what the website looked like. So you had, on the left-hand side, you had this body. You could click anywhere and you saw the cross-section. So I found it really made a huge impact on me that I could see all the insides of this man, but I had no idea of what he was as a whole. And at the same time, I was just, again, the beginning of the internet, and there was internet dating, so I was playing a bit with internet dating, and it seemed to me, okay, so and I was doing a bit of internet dating and get to know some people online. And at the same time, I was looking at this body and seeing all the insides of this body. It was a very intimate relationship. So I was like, okay, so maybe I can download my perfect man, which I did. So I downloaded all the slices and then thought, well, if I download these slices, print them onto something clear and stack them back up again, do I not make my man? So this was my MFA project. So what you see are all the cross sections every 2 centimeters, silk screened onto sheets of clear acrylic and stacked back up again. And the result was this kind of ghostly figure that kind of hovers within the cube of acrylic. And what I found really fascinating about this project, and I still do, is that in the process of him becoming virtual, he lost his physicality completely. Well, he had to die because he was a corpse, but they sliced him so finely that actually the physical flesh just turned to mush. It was just so, in order to become this virtual data set, he lost his physical being. And that was something that I felt that came through in the sculpture, because at eye level you see straight through it, and it's only with an optical illusion that it kind of volumes out. Again, some kind of leaps I made at that time. Because I downloaded him, I felt it was only polite that I should reciprocate in some way and I should upload something. And being someone who loved anatomical print, I thought I should fillet my skin and upload my skin, which I did. So digitally, using a flatbed scanner, I scanned the whole of my skin and then stitched it all together to make this warning, some kind of shocking image coming. This flayed skin. And I was interested in this, what's the idea of being with somebody mediated via a computer, that you're displaced in place and time. So I decided to make this into a touchscreen piece. So in order to navigate around the skin, you had to actually touch the glass, which was very similar to the glass of the flatbed scanner that I'd used. So that was how you interacted with the piece. You had this as like this interactive table, and then the print on the wall as a map. Following on from the sculpture, which was called I Know You Inside Out, I knew very little about medical imaging at the time, but I was told that there was this thing called MRI and CT. And as a very hopeful graduate, I just sent out lots and lots of letters to lots and lots of scanning places and said, I have this great idea. I want to scan my family to make a sculpture. Will you please do it? And one person said yes. So the University of Nottingham said yes. So I moved on, progressing with the idea, the technique that I'd formed with I Know You Inside Out, to make a family portrait. So here, it's my dad, and my mum, that's me, and that's my sister. So we were MRI scanned every 2 centimeters as the visible human was sliced. and then they're printed onto sheets of acrylic and then stacked back up again. And these two pieces are in the show downstairs. Interesting to me, in a technical way, they have a very different feel from the visible human, who feels much more solid, whereas the MRI scans feel much more watery. They kind of feel like, almost like jellyfish-like, which is interesting because MRI does image water and it has that kind of watery feel. What I was interested in with this idea was the romantic notion of preservation, that if we could gather enough information about our loved ones, that there was a possibility that we could somehow, with technology allowing, in a kind of post-human way, we could bring them back in some future date once that technology allowed it to happen. This just shows, this is a picture of, this is my mum in getting ready to be scanned. And something that I also discovered through the process of making it is that scanning a full body medically is really actually scanning the whole body. A full body scan is from here to here and doesn't include the fingertips and the toes. And so this is actually quite a challenge for the radiographers to do it, because they have to do it in sections and get it to line up. And that's something that I continually come across, is that as an artist I want to use the whole body, everything is important for me, but medically it's rarely the case that much is acquired. So around the same time, I also think a lot about mediated communication. So this piece is also down in the exhibition. It's called Text Me. And I was struck around the same time about the internet cafes was also about the same time that we got the mobile phones. And how if you went to a bar with friends, the first thing people would do would put their phones on the table, and it seemed there was almost like a bit of a competition, but you were aware of how many text messages other people were getting, and that it became almost a symbol of how popular people were. The one who got the most messages was the most important. And that still is, I think, the case today. So I was interested, I just started on the project where I kept all my text messages for 1 year, and then decided to etch them onto little strips of copper, so that it became like a plumage, that they were like decorative things that were coming out of the body, but that also acts as a physical barrier, because you can't actually get up to the body anymore because of all these messages that are coming out. And of course, copper is a material I really like to work with, because it is what was used for this communication. It's what actually materially allows the communication of this data. Along the same lines, again reflecting on this kind of mediated communication, so hopefully you can see this looks quite a lot like aphelia, melasophilia, and I was thinking about, there's a friend who fell in love and moved from the UK to America to be with this man that she'd fallen in love with, and then it all fell apart, the relationship, and she was stuck there, but was constantly sending me emails telling me about all the woes and all the troubles that she was going through. And it seemed to me very much that she was sort of, as Ophelia, becoming obsessed and drowning in all these thoughts. And so I made this image of her. And so, close. All these lines are actually, rather than the reeds in melasophilia, but actually lines of text. This is printed on, I should say, this is screen printed onto a stack of 6 sheets of glass. And so it gives a kind of a volume effect. It's almost like a sarcophagus, like she's sort of trapped in there. So this is still quite early, up to 2005. I was still really interested in exploring as many different scanning technologies as I could, and kept writing lots of letters and asking people to help me and provide me with data. And one scanning centre that did work with me, they were doing oncology scans, so for cancer screening. And they said I was able to use their data, but that I wasn't able to know who the subject was. And that was the first time I'd had that experience, that I was allowed to use data, but I wasn't allowed to know who the original person was. It was a very bizarre thing to open up files and know you were looking at the inside of somebody, but have no clue who the actual physical person was. So these scans are very interesting to explore because of their colour. And I titled the work Radiant, because the way these images are made is that a radioactive isotope is injected into the body. And so that play on words that the body is radiating. This is, I managed to get some data from So if you see the Iceman, who's an ice mummy, very famous ice mummy, there's a whole museum dedicated to him in Italy. I was interested to work with him and also another ice mummy who is from Peru, but I was never actually given permission to use it. And this took me 7 years to get access to this data, just writing letters. They finally allowed me to use it, but to get the data, I actually had to go to Italy to go and get the disc. They wouldn't email it to me. But it was quite fortuitous because they allowed me to visit the museum and they gave me a tour and they explained that this mummy is preserved thanks to a very fine layer of little ice crystals on the surface of his body, and that's actually what preserves him in his state. And so it gave me the idea of making a sculpture of him where he's actually he's materialized in these little specks of light, so echo the idea of these little ice crystals. So what you see here are, I think it's like 85 sheets of acrylic, and in each sheet there are some drill holes, and there's a light in the bottom, and it shines up and catches in the drill holes. So it was always a struggle to find data. I found myself going back to data that I had. So this is a reworking of the family portrait data that I had. So this is actually my mother. But I was with the family portrait. It's a very solid block, and it's very rigid, and they're very regimented. So I was interested in exploring it. If you take that structure away, if you take the spacing away, and allow it just to take as much information out as well. So I took out the color and just used the outlines and had them engraved into the acrylic, and then cut out the structure and just allowed it to sort of flop. This came soon after I had my first son, so it was also maybe a portrait of how exhausted I was feeling. I was thinking about if you take out so much energy and information, how that would feel. And this is another revisiting of the family portrait data. So when I was being scanned, I remember having a very strong thought that this, if everybody has been scanned, it's a very small space, and I found it really hard not to think of all the people that had been in that space before me, and all the people that would be in that space after me, and to think of that kind of plotting of that presence. And I had this image of a digital tube, and so I was able to work with the data here by using a 3D model, and then putting in 3D software and putting a cloud of points on the surface, then exporting the XYZ coordinates, and then plotting it in this box using beads and string. So what you're looking at here there's 5,000 strings, and in each string is a tiny bead, and they're all suspended at the correct height to make this surface of the body. So I said I've constantly been struggling to find data. And then in 2007, I had this really wonderful encounter with a radiographer who told me about this free software you could get online called Osiris. And not only was there free software, but there were free data sets. And for me, which was amazing, there was this Marilène. So I said about the full body scans, how it's not normal to have fingers and toes. This is a full body scan. She has fingers and she has toes. She's really high resolution, and she kind of, and from what I can tell, she's female. She must be more or less my age, and I could identify her as like sort of an avatar. I felt that she was similar enough to me that I could repurpose her for my artwork. And it also, because I've been working with images of my family, or scans of my family and sort of known people, which I felt I couldn't really alter very much. I didn't feel I could mediate them. This allowed me a lot of freedom to explore. So I started off making more process-based works where I was really just exploring what the data could do and what I could do with the radiology software. So in this here, it's quite a formal exploration where I was putting access points in the data and exporting images around those access points. What I found interesting, so this is the same body, but the access point is in different places. And it made me think a bit about how we are in lots of gaming worlds, where we drop in to a space and then do a 360 turnaround, and depending where we are, even in the same space, it seems very different. So I kind of played with, I went along with that and made this series to kind of show how different, depending on your axis, the body could be. This is an image of all the slices planned out. These pieces also experimenting with the different axes, but also with all the different color modes that are available through the radiology software. Again, on here I was really playing with the idea of dressing up or becoming a character, but dressing up from the inside out. So these are made with inkjet and silkscreen. And this, Natalie was saying that I did an MPhil at the Royal College of Art, and so these were part of my thesis document and exhibition for the MPhil. And as all those people are doing MFAs and or your BFAs know, you have to, when you're in the academy, you have to constantly justify and explain and think about what you're doing even before you've done it. And I found that when I graduated, it was kind of pretty exhausted with that, and also reflected that I was starting to use a lot of techniques where I was allowing a machine to make my work for me. So I was giving my work to a printer to print it or a machine to engrave it, and I kind of recognized that I felt that I was going against what I was actually trying to do with my work, which is to try and encourage embodiment and privileging materialization. So I decided one thing was to no longer allow machines to make majority of my work, and that I would have to try and do it more by hand and use more embodied methods. And also, I was also recognized that I was taking the body and exporting it from the computer. It was a one-way thing. The body was scanned and then exported out. What I wanted was to try and allow things from the real world to come and change that scanned body before it came out again, if that makes sense. So I had these new two rules that I came out of with my MPhil. It also, at the same time, I moved to Brazil, which was a big influence on me because, firstly, I had no access to the normal materials that I worked with. I didn't have access to any printmaking materials, and I was in Rio de Janeiro, and I also had this new understanding of the body as something you could tell a story with. So in the carnival, all the bodies have got costumes, and they're telling a story. And so I embraced that and allowed Melanix, my avatar, to tell stories, or to respond to materials that I was encountering. So this is one of the first pieces I made when I arrived in Brazil. We were traveling quite a lot, and on our travels I came across a dream catcher in the shape of a fish. And it was very decorative, and it made me think that if you could do that with a fish, then you could do it with cross-sections of the body, and then what would that mean? So I embarked on the project of exporting all the paths of the CT scans and making dream catchers from them, and then suspending feathers underneath. These are feathers from the carnival costumes. These are ostrich feathers. Another work in this series called Protest. I went to a talk by Amelia Jones, and she was talking about performance art, and in her discussion she was talking about an illegal immigrant in the UK who was about to be deported, and the day before he was deported he went into Manchester County Court and disemboweled himself. And it was such a strong image, and it made me think that this data that I'm working with, this data body, for her to disembowel herself, it would be utterly symbolic. So I decided, it was a vision that haunted me for a long time, and I decided to make it. So here I printed all the scans onto card, and then shredded her intestines. And if you can see from the image, but on the underside is the UK Immigration Act. Again, another piece in this series, when we were in Brazil, one of our close friends was killed in the plane crash that was going from Rio to Paris. And I'd already been thinking a lot about the Hindu mother goddess who has 8 arms to protect all her children. So I made this sculpture where the Hindu mother goddess is failing to protect her children. She's also falling. This piece is also in the exhibition downstairs. So this piece I really like this. This is Coroplast. So I'm always kind of thinking about materials that allude to the digital or kind of give a virtual feel. And I really enjoyed this material because it has that kind of stereolithographic feel, but then if you go to the side, and I encourage if you go see the exhibition to look through the side, she's completely hollow, you can see straight through it. And yeah, another piece from the series called Arisha. So this piece I started off just doing the head, and it came again thinking about what is it that makes something look like it comes from the digital space. Because when I work with my scans, I will select them and then copy and paste them, put them into a white background, put them into a black background, and then after a while they acquire this halo, and often my scans acquire a white halo. So I was interested in making this black with the white around, and I started beading the head and then got so far, I wasn't sure what to do with it, and then came across photographs of a contemplate ritual. So contemplate is an Afro, a Brazilian religion which mixes some Bantu rituals with Catholicism, and they have many rituals where they call the ancestral spirits. So there's one where they will dance all night, there's a group of women who will dance all night in order to call the ancestral spirits. And there's one moment in the evening where one is chosen, and then she takes this position where she arches back and is caught by the rest of the congregation. And when I saw that image, I was struck by the notion that Marilène, in her very fragile state, would be one who would open and receive spirits. Especially, and you can see that the gold there, that's her, that's the why she's been scanned, that's her tumour, which is, I guess, fantastically being removed in this act of receiving the spirits. This work is not made from Marilène, but it's from the same dataset, and the reason I wanted to include it in the talk is that I think this and the next piece is kind of maybe one of the reasons why I'm here now. So Sean emailed me in 2009 and asked me to be part of an exhibition about stem cell research. And this is one of the sculptures that I made as a result of the collaboration we did. So one of the things that we collaborated with scientists and ethicists, and some of the things that came out of the discussion was the thinking about the body as a resource. We would harvest cells from living bodies. And so here the body opens and reveals this very lush and gold, rich mine of materials for us to use and exploit. So again, this is beaded. So you can see all these pieces in the last 4 or 5 pieces we've seen were all done by hand. So really, I was really committed to the idea of investing the sculptural object or the artwork with my laboured body. So transferring my body into the artwork. So this is again part of the stem cell research exhibition, Keep Me Safe from Harm, and I was thinking a bit about my work with scans, and one of the scientists was doing scanned blastocysts, which is sort of the embryo before it becomes viable from when the cells are harvested, and sort of subverting it, whereas normally we would try and protect this and make it the other way around, that this becomes something that protects an adult. So this is really scaled up, so it's 2.5 meters high and 5 meters big, and then it allowed the viewer to stand in the middle and be inside, encapsulated in like a protective pod. And part of that collaboration, I met a choreographer called Isabel Van Grimes, who did the Body in Questions here, if anybody saw it. And just in discussion with her, because every time I work with Marilène, I need to make her flip, I need to change her colour, I change the opacity, and it kind of seemed to me that I was making her perform, almost dance. This is kind of like the visualization of kind of what I can do with her in the radiology software. And talking to Isabel, we kind of came up with this idea, wouldn't it be great if a dancer could trigger these things to happen in the body, that it became a bit like almost like a striptease, like a dance. So after a number of years of development, we came up with this interactive installation where you can see this is one of Isabel's dancers who's interacting with a video projection via Kinect. And so if the dancer moves her right arm, then Marilène's right arm will deflesh. If she moves her left leg, then her left leg will deflesh. And once she's got all the way down to the skeleton, the dancer can make her pirouette and then flip. So it becomes like a conversation. And Isabel also asked for this sculpture to become part of the Body in Question installation. And it was really a very, very exciting thing for me to see my work be interpreted in this way. And it's something I hope that I'll be able to continue doing. And I have been able to continue doing it when I had the show in Massamoka, which is in Massachusetts. I was paired with another choreographer, and we worked that he choreographed the dance elements with a live person, and I made video backdrops for the dancers to perform with. I'm just going to show you my favorite one. I'm just going to... I don't know if the sound is working. So it's a very exciting thing for me to see the real live body alongside videos and sculptures. For me, it kind of completes the presentation of the idea of the virtual body and the physical body. So this, in this presentation, we had a number of these clips. There were like 10 of them all together. That was just one that you saw, and each one focused on different parts of the body. So after moving to Brazil, we moved to Angola in sub-Saharan Africa. And that was, again, a huge change to my work, because not only was it another layer of challenge and access to my materials and ways of working, but it also made me really reconsider what a scanned body set is. So it became very clear to me that when I was working with it and being in Angola, that what I was working with was a privileged white woman who had access to excellent medical health care. Whereas the people that I was surrounded with, the majority of people in Angola, was no way they would ever be able to have access to be scanned, and even if they were scanned, they would have no access to the healthcare that we take for granted. So it really challenged me. I really shook the foundation of what I felt I was working with. And it led me to go right back to some early techniques that I was working with, and to work with the first images that I have of the scanned data. So I was working with the radiology software and creating renderings of her, and then trying to fill the blackness that surrounds scans with some of these kind of clashes and paradoxes that I was finding myself thinking about. I was also learning a lot about the Bantu traditions and cultures, and we travelled to KwaZulu-Natal, and we learnt about a ritual that happens in KwaZulu culture where when somebody dies, the body is always brushed over with buffalo thorn, because the buffalo thorn, there are thorns that go up and thorns that go down. The thorns that go up release the soul to heaven, and the ones that go down keep the memory on earth. So it was an image that I was really struck with, and so I made this photograph where you can see there's a digital part, and then the hand-drawn part is actually bleached into the photograph with photographic bleaches. And I made a large series of these, and they're all in the exhibition downstairs. I also made some prints as well, which are not in the show, but there are some different images. This image, so I came in a lot of things that really kind of shook everything that I took for granted and made me realise how lucky I am, and how fortunate, how privileged we are. So I worked in an orphanage when I was in Angola, and I was told that a lot of the children that were in the orphanage were there because they'd been accused of witchcraft, which I found really, really shocking, and that actually the hardest thing was they were to protect the children from their parents. Because if a child in the village was accused of witchcraft, then the parents would try and kill that child because they brought bad luck on the whole community, which was really, really shocking. And so I was asking people in Angola, do you believe in this? Do you believe it's true that witchcraft can possibly exist? It just seemed incredulous to me. And then one man told me the story that he was as all men in Angola were, they were in the civil war. And he was saying that when he was in the war, one of his troop was struck by lightning in the forehead and was completely charred. And I asked a little bit more, and he said, it was really rainy, so he was sleeping under a tree. So I thought, okay, that's kind of strange. He said, but it must be witchcraft, because this man that was in his troop was having an affair with the local witch doctor's wife, and so this was a curse. So this lightning was sent to strike him in the forehead and kill him. And it was such a strong image that I felt that this inspired this. So you see Marilène here, and being struck by the lightning. I was also very intrigued by the notion of the bride price is still very strong in Angola, so I couldn't help but ask how much I would be worth. And I'm worth 8 cows, so 12 cows, so there she is, Marilène with her wealth in cattle. At the same time, in Angola, my mother-in-law had died of intestinal cancer. And it was a number of years that she had radiotherapy and chemotherapy, and then there was obviously the day that we were told that the treatment wasn't working, she couldn't have surgery anymore, and we had to prepare that she would leave us soon. And we were told this story when we were standing by a harbour, and I was looking at all the boats, and it struck me this image that in order for her to survive, which she couldn't, she would have to be excavated. She would have to have all her intestines taken out. And it was sort of this image of what is medicine doing that we will do this to ourselves in order to survive? What does a person become if all this is taken out? And so this image haunted me, and I made this photo painting And it haunted me more, and so I made this, where the actual, which is actually made into a dugout. What's his influence? There was very few artifacts that I actually had access to when I was in Angola, but dugouts were around, and so I think that's also why this image came together. This is made from laser cut MDF, so we're looking at is hundreds of slices of laser cut MDF, which is burnt, and then they're stuck together. Going along the same lines, that there were very few artworks, and there was no contemporary art at all in Angola at the time. But there were craft markets, and one thing we found in craft markets were chief chairs. So obviously I was influenced by these amazingly beautifully carved chief chairs, but then also learning more and more how much power is abused in Angola. But there was that Angola is one of the richest countries in Africa, but so many people live in poverty. So I decided to make this chief chair, but to make the chief mindless and spineless, so excavated out the brain and the spine. And another artifact which we found a lot in Angola are headrests. And at the same time, my mother was diagnosed with early onset Lewy body dementia. And so seeing these headrests, which is an idea of a rest, I was inspired to make something for her as an escape, a rest for her dementia, that she could momentarily escape what she was going through with her dementia. Again, I was also responding to materials that I could actually have access to in Angola, and there was a lot of African fabric. And also thinking about, you remember the interactive video piece where the body was defleshing at different points? And also being in Angola, and I'd never felt so white or so aware of the colour of my skin, and always trying to pretend that I wasn't this white privileged woman. So here you see Melanix desperately trying to find a different level of de-skinness to blend in to the environment, which obviously isn't possible. So going back to my mother, so she was 59 when she was diagnosed with this dementia, but so of course as a family we couldn't believe it. We thought it's stress, or there's something with the medication that's not working. And it was only after 2 years of the doctors telling us, and then us actually seeing this scan, which is a DAT scan, and that was, for me, that was when the first time I actually believed it. This is proof. This is, yes, she has got this illness. And this scan is done using radioactive tracers, so it attaches onto dopamine, and then that's how this is imaged and proves that she has this illness. And so the notion of this tagging and fluorescence became a really motive I wanted to explore in my work. And I was sketching a lot in my sketchbook, thinking about, almost the randomness of this kind of tagging. Why does she have it? Why are some of these parts important, and why do they fluoresce? Why do we choose some data to be important? And then I spilled a water bottle in my bag, and it ruined the drawing, but actually it really led me on to something, because I was thinking about, okay, so in medical imaging, it was important to trace the fact that she has this illness. And at the same time, she was forgetting me. So I wanted to make a product where where I became the important thing in her brain. It wasn't these dopamine things. So I printed out the brain very large, and then did a performance where I wet my body, and then laid on the scan, and smudged the ink, and then traced around the trace of where I'd been in the body, in her brain. And then this next series, which is the new work which I've made since arriving in Edmonton, again was triggered by something that the doctor said to my family about my mother, was that there were no other treatments that she could receive, so maybe we should focus more on yoga and those kind of holistic therapies. And it kind of, and I think with dementia, people are hidden away, and there's not a space in society to look at them. So I wanted to make a series of sculptures where we do look at the inside of these fluorescents and but look at illness. So here there's two scanned bodies, and on the black side But you can see it downstairs much better than these photographs, but on one side it's all black and on the inside it's very colourful. And this here, which shows more the yoga position, where the body is stretching open and revealing its very beautiful and fluorescent insides. And this is all part of the process of actually making the work. So this is etched out of copper, and in order to make the etching, parts of the copper have to be protected, and I use fluorescence in order to use that protection. And then here, this is Marilene again, obviously, and this is cut out of, this is laser cut again out of MDF, and she's doing a forward fold in order to reveal her glorious insides. And so you can see these in the gallery, better to see them in person. Okay, that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much for listening. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the one PVC from harm, and just about like the concepts behind it.
So it was made as part of a project on stem cell research, and we had lots of discussions with medical doctors and ethicists about stem cell research. And something that kind of seemed like a paradox to me was that we kind of these things, the embryos that we would normally try and protect as adults. You know, we were the ones, we have the role to protect the blastocysts and children and babies, and I don't to subvert that and make it that it's the blastocyst that's protecting us. So I changed the scale so that it became like a protective pod for an adult to enter rather than for the adult to keep safe. Does that make sense? Okay.
I may have misheard you, but it sounded like you made a claim that there was no contemporary art in Angola in 2014 when you found it. So I wanted to address that because it seems it's hard to believe.
There were contemporary artists and there were exhibitions, but relative to somewhere like here or Brazil, I was living in Luanda and there was maybe one contemporary art exhibition. There's no real contemporary art space in the same way. We take it for granted that we can go and see an exhibition every weekend. And in Angola, that's not the case. There are contemporary art spaces, but they're not very good, and the work it wasn't really given it just wasn't anything like I've seen before. And it's definitely changing. Now there's a lot more contemporary art happening. There's some really great Angolan artists that just weren't the usual spaces that I would go to. Yeah.
So just as an extension of that, I guess as a sort of British expat living in both Brazil and Luanda, how did you relate to the local art communities? What was your relationship with the local artists and these exhibitions?
In Brazil, I found it really hard to enter into the artist community. I found I had a studio in an artist complex, but I found that on a very practical level, I would work during the day, and I found it that Brazilian artists worked more in the evening, so there was very little crossover, and it was a very practical sense. And I did have some very small exhibitions, but nothing major. I found it really hard to engage in Brazil. In Angola, it was much more open, much more welcoming, and Angolan artists were really, really, really keen to engage and interact and had great conversations. But it was a real challenge, and for Angolan artists, I think it was very frustrating. They would make their work in Angola and weren't able to get it out, or they went and made it out and then weren't able to bring it back into Angola. So there's definitely a good artist community in Angola, but it's very restrained. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you negotiate issues of cultural appropriation, given that you're frequently referencing cultural practices or material culture of cultures that have an extensive history of colonial oppression?
Do you want to talk about one work specifically?
Uh,
Okay. So I guess I'd be really honest. I guess I approach it in a naive way in the beginning. So we think about the work that I made in Brazil. I used the materials which I found in the carnival costume making area very freely. I felt that I was allowed to use it and that everybody was using it. And in Angola, I think for me, I was using it because it became part of the work. It was part of the conversation with the fact that these new technologies, this new way of seeing the body or being with the body is so different from the way that the cultures that use these craft methods use it. So the idea of respecting ancestors and being with each other and working with the body. So that's the way that I take it, and I think hopefully it's it was in order to question why this disembodied immaterial body and how different it is from those artifacts. So that makes that, I don't know if I answered it in a very clear way.
Yeah, I guess it must be difficult as someone who is British and there's that whole legacy of colonialism to how do you take influence from the environment that you're in and the cultures that you're experiencing in a way that's not.
Yeah, I think travelling to these places has been, and also coming to Canada again is a whole new thing. You realise what being British, and I realise I come from a history of people that have done a lot of really, really bad things to the world. And like going back to London, I've never realised that. I would go back to London and think, the reason London is so rich and so amazing is because of everything we stole from everybody else. And to be honest, at school we're not really taught that kind of thing. It's not part of the history that the education we're given. So travelling has allowed me to realise this. And I think maybe with that Coroplast series, the one with the black, with the painting in, was kind of trying to come to terms with some of those things about the privilege that we have and how polar it is and how it makes no sense. So confusion kind of means nonsensical, the confusion. And so I don't really know the answer because it's very hard to have a clear answer to those things because we know the history that I come from, there's a lot of bad things that were done. But I think to not engage with cultures and maybe ways of working is the worst thing to do. To actually think about it and to spend a lot of time in learning these processes and using them and incorporating them is a way forward. I don't feel ashamed of the work I've done. I'm proud of it. But I understand that I need to always inform myself. But I do feel that's a way of moving forward is to engage in these methods. What do you think? I don't know, do people agree? I don't know. I mean, what should we do? Should we not use any of these methods because they mean so much?
Yeah, well, I guess coming back to that, it seems like your works are very much tracking your life and things that are happening to you and your family, and you said, you're certainly living in these places. But I just wanted to ask about your process, because some of it just seems so mind-bogglingly meticulous and painstaking, and obviously, you were saying, that's part of what you're intending with the message of the work, putting your body into it. I was just wondering if you enjoy that kind of obsessiveness, or if it's really something that you butt up against.
No, I think if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't keep doing it. I like the challenge. I really like the challenge. So I have an idea, and I know that in order to do it, it's almost like a bit of algebra or something. I know I have to take my scan data set, break it down, do something to it, and then try and reformulate it and get it out in the right way again. I really enjoy that kind of the mental thing I have to go through. And it doesn't work. Rarely does it actually work the way I think it's going to work, so I have to kind of fix it along the way. But I think those kind of repetitive actions are very enjoyable, I think, and I think lots of people find them enjoyable, knitting and weaving and beading, and I think all these things are good for the soul. I do. I think good for humans to do this kind of thing. So I do enjoy it. And I also enjoy the challenge of trying to figure out the mechanics behind it too. Yes.
First of all, I want to say thank you for your show. It's a pleasure to be sharing the same space with you. We talked briefly just before the show about the ingenuity of the work and what I was seeing. And I think we had just a short conversation, and I think that this show will start more of the conversation about what we're talking about, appropriation. That's more complicated, because I do think that there's some things that you're doing out of respect, but still that knowledge is, hard to get to. But to that, wanted to ask you about the Tri-Council ethics manual. Have you taken a look through that? And what did you find that you would have run into in a Canadian Tri-Council ethics binder? Did you find that you ran into things when you were looking through it?
I haven't been through that, so
okay.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But maybe I should, and we can revisit this conversation.
Okay, that's
Which
okay.
what would you? I'd be interested to know what you would think about
Well,
that.
there's so many things, ethics using human body, so I was just wondering if you had run into the Canadian book. Okay, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah. The question of ethics in relation to using scans is really interesting because it's evolved so much.
Yeah.
So, like when I first did the family portrait, which was in 2002, there was no ethics. So I wrote a letter. The radiographer said, yes, that sounds fine. Come in on a Sunday afternoon. I'll scan your family. That was it. Nothing else. Now to do that. So I have been through the ethics procedure here in order to carry on working in this way, and of course it takes filling out a long form, and for it to go to committee and to be approved. So things have changed so much. So it's been really interesting to chart that, how the ethics has changed, and also how ethics is so different all over the world. So Marilène, because she was scanned in Switzerland, the ethics there is completely open. She's free to use. Anybody can use her. Anybody can download her. That wouldn't be the same here, it wouldn't be the same in the UK. And then in Brazil, I find even more interesting, is if people will walk along the high street in Rio and they'll have a Gucci bag in one hand, they'll have their scans from the scanning company in the other hand. So it's money, it's currency. And it's just very different all over the world. And it's interesting. It would be interesting to see in my lifetime whether it becomes standardized internationally or not. Yes.
Hi, I'm just curious what you think of or have thought of, sorry my voice is bad, picture about the Hagen, the body worlds. Just like, when I went through it, I was struck with actually taking the body and turning it into sculpture. I always thought, just with talking about ethics and things like that, if you saw one of the body worlds?
Yes, I did see the body world, and it's often a question that I'm asked. I find it very problematic. But fascinating. I mean, going to body worlds, it is amazing. You can't take your eyes off these things. They are amazing. What he's done is incredible. But I just found the way the presentation of it is so problematic. The one I went to was at the Truman Brewery in London, and so in amongst these plastinated bodies were pot plants and and then there was like a Halloween, if you came in a Halloween costume, you got in free. It was a real freak show. I found it really, really problematic. And the way that he presents himself as a celebrity and, looking like Joseph Beuys. I have lots of problems with it. But there's no doubt what he makes is fascinating. I think it's just framed and very much presented in the wrong way. And the fact that there's all this controversy about whether he gets his bodies from, and that's not clear, so. Yeah. But I definitely see the link, absolutely. A lot of my work does kind of is similar to what he's doing. But it's not the real body. These are copies of bodies. His is the actual physical body. Yes?
Can you speak briefly I think
Yeah, I guess
perhaps
what-
you can track someone's location, and it's, you know, like we put our whole personality into it.
Yeah. I'm kind of reading all these books which tell me that I shouldn't be worried about this stuff and that, it's positive and we should be positive about all these things for our children. But I just can't be. I find it really scary. Like, because I have 2 young boys. And my son who's 12, going on 13. He's already seems it's like a prosthesis, his phone. He's constantly on it. And I just feel really scared for him that it's going to lead him to not have meaningful relationships with people and enjoy being with real people. So that really worries me. And all the tracking and the fact that we don't have, we know that all this information that we put online is open to everybody and we kind of almost don't care. Otherwise we would stop doing it, but we're still doing it. So I find it very worrying. And I keep trying to encourage this kind of appreciation of being in the moment and being embodied and enjoying materiality and try and hide my son's phone as much as I can. Yes? Yeah.
I'm sort of a follow-up to that. So you start with like work by Hans Norbeck, early singularitarian sort of thought, and you moved away from that to get this more embodied virtuality. Have you kept up with looking at what's being done in that, like with Ray Kurzweil and sort of Rapture for the Nerds sort of fantasy, or did you just moved away from that entirely?
I think I'm still really interested in it and I try and read it occasionally, but I think I have become more committed to the act of finding ways to use medical data for artworks. And so taking the medical off it, that it's not necessarily medical, that it's just, for me, it's so, why is these scans different from photography? It's imaging the body, or ourselves, and of course it is very, very meaningful. If we can separate the medical away from it, then why can we not use it to think about ourselves in this age when so much of us is made up of data and digital technology? So I have kind of moved, but I am very interested in it, but I guess maybe my focus is more on that. And then also, as you can just see in the work, how it's evolved. But then another thing that's happened is as I've aged. So when I first made Family Portrait, I thought, I was invincible. I could never get ill. My family could never get ill. These scans, they were just photographs, but they didn't mean anything. And of course, actually, what's shown through the work, that actually they do start to really mean something. So those DAT scans from my mother had such a strong significance in my life, and so that I've addressed that in that way. So that's why maybe I got sidetracked from keeping up with the latest AI, but I still find it very interesting and stimulating to think about. Yes?
As you work so intimately with Marilène as a muse, did you ever kind of animate her and think about who was this woman who had the scan and what happened to her and how things ended up and kind of that side of it?
Yeah, I think about it all the time. I think about it a lot, because I've used her body so. Now I think I've counted it like over 50 artworks from her body, and the amount of hours I must have spent on her body, and I have no idea who she is. I guess she's Swiss, and she had a tumor, but from the very little I know, hopefully, I think she probably was okay. I did contact the people that made the software and tried to make contact. But of course they couldn't, but they did, and I was really worried that they might say, you can't use this data for doing this. And it was almost kind of a way of saying, am I allowed to do this or not? And they were very happy, they were very excited about the work and did an exhibition, so it worked out really well. But I said, no, I don't know who she is. And that was something I found really interesting in the exhibition, Tanya, was that the image of you with the clay on really, I think, looks like phonetics. I haven't said that to you privately, but I found that really striking. So I wonder if one day, if I were to meet her, whether I would recognize her. And goodness knows what she would think. But that's what happens. That's also the question of the work. What happens? It's her body, but it's out there, so anyone can use it about appropriation. This is what the digital world is. If you do it, it's free. You can, you're giving it up. And so there's also a question of the work. How far can you push it? Yeah.
Having such an intensely focused body of work, what activities do you engage in, if any, to sublimate the heft from your focus? Do you have any other do you create other things as an artist in order to relax or distract yourself from your main body of work?
Good question. I guess that's why I really enjoy making video work. That is, I find that really relaxing and a way out of this kind of having to hold it all together. So I probably still work with the same material, so I see the data set as my material, but I'll work with different kind of methods as a release to change pace, yeah. But I really want to stop working with it. I just find it really, really hard to. Like my husband keeps saying, like, you need to stop working with the same data, it's the same, you need to stop doing it. I just can't, I just feel like, okay, there's just one more sculpture I want to make, just one more. But I do think the next thing I want to move into is, especially with these last pieces, I had to work really, really hard to keep all the slices in line and to make them all fit together. And I then sort of caught myself as, why can't I just let all these pieces just not fit together? And to let go of the registration and the need for alignment. And so also something I've always thought about this, Walter Benjamin's essay on the age of art and the age of mechanical reproduction, is that he says that photography allows artists to focus on abstraction. And I always felt, I found abstraction always really hard to think about and know how I could approach. But maybe this is my way in to abstraction, is to let go of having to hold all the scans together. I think hopefully that can allow myself to do that. But I'm pretty tight.
If I may have one more question. Do you think about the spiritual in your work? How does the spiritual nature come into your work?
I think it's very, very important. Maybe it's very much the core of the work. I was brought up a Catholic, so I think this kind of idea of the spirit and the body and transcendence is something that I've always been thinking about, and maybe that the body is kind of the physical and the data body is a spirit. I guess that's like something that I play with, is that I just kind of think the video is almost like the spirit, and the physical is the physical earth. I'm a lapsed Catholic, but I think that's really deeply ingrained in me to find it hard not to return to that idea. Yes.
I'm struck by the work around dementia and the sense of memory failing, the work that you showed with imagining your own body inside the neural pathways of your mother's brain. So there was a kind of real intimacy created between your body and her body, and a memory path between. And with Marilène, it's almost as if she's a figure without memory. You've got the data scan, which is a kind of memory of this actual living being, but this production of works about her, based on her, to me seem to be about a woman with no memory. And so I wonder, I guess I would like to ask you about memory as a theme in relation to your work in general, if it's something that you put into the way you are thinking about the work over time.
Well, I think clearly being a carer for my mother, that it makes you question, obviously, how important memory is, and if you lose your memory, how the whole sense of who you are is lost. I think until having to deal with that, I hadn't really thought. It wasn't something I was conscious about. I guess I was conscious about making narratives and creating meaning somehow by adding narratives into Marilène, and whether that was possible, whether you could apply a narrative onto a data set and make it become something. And now I think it's going to inform the work going forward, for sure. Especially because I think with all this technology that we work with, our memories are changing. There's no question we're really augmented by this, but it changes the way that we hold on to information. We allow ourselves to let go and rely on the computer a lot more. And I also find it's interesting that in society we have, so I feel like we're having to try and keep up with our machines, be as intelligent as these things, be as clever. Can I break down this data set and do this and put it back together again as cleverly as the radiology software? But at the same time in society, we have a rise of people with dementia where there's no access to this technology. So I do feel that I'm caught between the two. That I'm having to do all this clever stuff, and then poor mum who is suffering and can't even find the toilet. But how that's going to come into the work, I don't know. I'm sure it will. Yes.
Do you think that the growing conversation with ethics of what you're doing is sort of contributing to the conversation with like the label you put into your work? Or is it more part of the ethics?
So I think responding to what Daniel was saying, is appropriating methods from cultures that are not my own and histories that are not my own. I think it's like something about with care. So if you care for something and you really invest time, if I spend a year like that, the Orisha piece took almost a year to make that. Someone who spends a year making something and does hopefully show some level of engagement and care with that making process. So hopefully that is maybe a way of thinking about it. This is after the fact, though. I have to be very honest. I started using beads because for me the bead stood in so cleanly and nicely as a pixel, as a unit of information. That's how I first approached it. But I thought a bead was very easy. Like I have a white pixel, I get a white bead. But now that I've travelled and I'm learning that this means so much to different cultures, obviously it's something I'm having to really think about. But I would hope for myself, I feel comfortable with it because I know I didn't just steal it and very quickly and not use it. I did hopefully do it in the right way, in a respectful way.
Are there any last questions? All right, so please join me in thanking Marilène.